What's going on, folks? Thanks for joining me here. My name is Derick G, and I just want to get a couple of thoughts off of my chest in regards to the MMA events that we had going on this weekend. No UFC this week, which is always a nice little break to see what else we got, get a little spotlight over to the other regional promotions and even the big time promotions. And this weekend, we had a little bit of controversy, even though there was none of the big show of the UFC. We had some PFL action. We had the semifinals for the lightweights and the welterweights over at the PFL playoffs. And we also had Bellator 264. So this was a nice clash, a nice head-to-head of the Bellator versus PFL. And, they actually aired some of the really big fights at the same exact time. So it left viewers over there with one little screen, one big screen, just trying to shift your eyes in a whole bunch of different directions. But what I'm really here to talk about today is global scoring. And I feel like this is a conversation that comes about every couple of weeks, if not months. And it's always in regard to poor judging. Really, that's what it comes down to. Sometimes we got problems with officiating. Sometimes we have problems with fighters doing weird stuff, but this time around it was truly just judging. But this is a big deal simply because I want to focus on the PFL here. We had one case going on in the PFL and one case going on in Bellator that I heavily disagreed with. And when I was watching it, I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy to me. You know what I mean? It didn't quite get the Twitter reactions that some of these crazy events normally do. But for me, I was just sitting back and I either wanted to write it up or wanted to talk about it. But I'm here to talk. So let's get straight into it, man. We had a matchup this weekend between Clay Collard and Raush Manfio. Clay Collard, simply put, man, he was a big favorite, ended up losing the fight via unanimous decision, 29-28 times 3. And what I want to talk about specifically is the partnership between Verdict MMA and the PFL, the Professional Fighters League. If you don't know what Verdict MMA is, it is the world's first kind of popularized fight prediction and betting platform, I guess you could say. It's an application for smartphones, and what's interesting about it is that you get to kind of gamify the fights. You don't necessarily have to bet money on it. You don't bet any money on it, actually. What you're betting is XP, experience points or whatever, and you're trying to climb up these rankings and be the best over the course of the weekend. Not only deciding who's going to win, but how they're going to win. And then you get to put the round that they're going to win at, and you get to allot a certain amount of XP to it. So the winner who, gets the right combination of things correct in the best form across all of the fights ends up getting placed, gold, silver, bronze, whatever. And it just makes it interesting. It makes it engaging for the fans who are watching at home. This past March, the PFL, they inked a deal with Verdict MMA, making them more or less not exclusive, but they are partners. So every time that a PFL event's going on, they're showing the global scorecards alongside the fight. So they're saying, all right, the fans at home, all the thousands of fans who are watching at home, this is how they scored the fight. Then they'll talk about the commentators and they'll ask the commentators, how did you score the fight? And then they'll give the judges. We'll see Verdict with a consensus score with many of the commentators, and we'll see the judges with a completely opposite score. And there is no one that's left held accountable for this. And that's what's crazy, is like, it's kind of hypocritical. It's like, why exactly would you partner up with a global scorecard, a global fight predicting application, put all of this hype into it, make a big marketing announcement, and kind of talk about this is the people's league, right? This is the MMA's league and this is the people's league and all that good stuff. Why would you put that out there and then have the Verdict global scorecard coincide with the judges completely opposite, fight ruling? Because at the end of the day, Clay Collard against Raush Manfio, he won in the global scorecard's eyes, he won the fight 29-27. And that's actually what I have it written down right here. Verdict ruled it 29.1 to 27.94 in favor of Clay Collard. So that is basically a 29-28. Obviously, you got to count in the decimals and do little stuff like that, but that is basically a 29-28 victory. There's a graphic where it asks all the commentators, who do you think won? And they all ruled it in favor of Clay Collard. And then to get a unanimous decision victory for Raush Manfio was just very telling, because it completely disregards all of the build up to it. To me personally, it's bad marketing because it's hypocritical. It is not, you're like losing trust with the viewers in the way that you are establishing your promotion, in terms of your judging. Obviously, it's a commission. It's not a promotion-based ideology or whatever. It's the commission picking some judges, and the judges, they see the fight how they see the fight. But this is something that we've often talked about. And the big thing that comes to mind for me is why exactly is nobody held accountable? You know, if a referee has a poor performance, you know, he's getting roasted on it. People are asking him questions. He has to kind of own up to it. But if a judge scores a fight a certain way, like, they don't have to. They're not obligated to go and be like, all right, well, this is why I scored it this way. And, you know, I saw the fight this way. And I understand that some other people could have saw it this way, but ultimately this is why I did it. Like, they don't got to write out no paper. They don't have an interview, no post-fight interview or anything like that. So I think it's troubling in this spot specifically because of what the PFL stands for and what makes it different from other promotions. Now, one of the main things that makes it different is that they had to, these fighters, all this set of fighters, they had to fight in order to be eligible for the playoffs. And once they made it and they got seeded in the playoffs, it is basically a 4-man tournament, more or less. Not at the same night, but it's a 4-man tournament. So, or like a Grand Prix, I guess you could say, if you want to go like Bellator style, right? But it is 4-man, and it's 4 men, and you have to fight 2 times. And if you win both of those fights, you're the champion. Simple as that. Bow, boom, done, right? But not only are you the champion, you get $1 million. And that's why the UFC veteran and former UFC champion Anthony Pettis said, okay, well, let me go over to the PFL because I think I could have a good chance to go and win that tournament, make $1 million. It's a lot more money than I'd be making over the course of 5, 6, 7 fights in the UFC or whatever the case, right? So you have this huge incentive for these fighters to go and put on their best performances, do whatever they can to, you know, hype up the PFL and go out and win that $1 million. And you jeopardize that. You not jeopardize it, you rig it. You completely disincentivize and you kind of destroy the hopes of a lot of these fighters, their chances of this big payday, the risk that they took to make this big payday. You ruin that via judging. And I think that's not right. To me, this is going to signal a little bit of negativity for those who would potentially view themselves as like, hey, you know, after my contract is up, I only got a couple fights left on my contract. I think I'm going to go over to the PFL and see if they'll pick me up, man, because I want to fight for that $1 million. Like, why would you do that if you see that the judging has been so historically poor in the PFL? Like, this Clay Collard Raush Manfio fight is not the first occurrence of this. Anthony Pettis got robbed out of a fight. We saw Rory McDonald against Gleason Tebow in his last fight get robbed, right? And then Rory McDonald obviously fought this weekend. He lost. The right man won in this one. But I'm just saying, you're seeing it time after time after time. And now look at where you are at. So I don't know if this is a strategy. I don't know if this is a tactic in order to kind of build up the fighters that they want to build up. Like, they don't necessarily want the UFC fighters and the Bellator fighters who have moved over to the PFL to like come and blow up. Like, I don't know if that's what it is, but I think it's very concerning because you're jeopardizing a lot of fighters' careers by doing this, because a lot of them, they took a big chance, probably blackballed themselves out of the UFC and of the Bellator promotions to come over to the PFL. And now if they have to continuously fight in the PFL and deal with these crazy judging situations, like I said, man, I think it just leaves a bad taste in the fighters' mouths. It leaves a bad taste in the viewers' mouths. And for somebody like me who's, you know, more on the hardcore side of fandom in terms of combat sports in general, it just makes me have a little bit of a discrediting thought process or feeling or sentiment towards the PFL, especially because they do their own little fighter rating, which makes no sense when we're talking about a 10-9 must system. You know, I know it's antiquated, it's an old boxing technique of scoring fights and whatever, but if that's your system, you can't necessarily be making up these other little rules and just trying to, you know, you can't be doing that stuff unless you want to really stand out as something different from what the rest of mixed martial arts is. But that's the unification of all of these promotions, is the same rule set, right? So I just think it's very troubling. I think Raush Manfio lost the fight personally. I think Clay Collard did enough to get it done. But listen, a win is a win is a win. And, you know, congratulations to Raush Manfio. You know, the judges must really like you. But like I said, this isn't the only thing that happened this weekend, because we also had something that has kind of been swept under the rug, and this happened at Bellator 264, and this was a fight between Taigwarter. This was actually the first fight on the main card. This is Taigwarter versus Khadzhimurat Bestaev. And if you know about Bistayev, he's former Dana White Contender Series, huge dude fighting at middleweight, you know, 6'6" middleweight against a young bomber, a young Hawaiian bomber in Taigwarter. But the point here for this one is that it was kind of the same exact thing. I saw the fight 2 rounds to 1 in favor of Taigwarter. However, it was a unanimous decision, 29-28 for Khadzhimurat Bestaev. And in the fight, I can't give credit. Maybe there was a 10-8 in there. Something I would have thought was fair was round 3 of that fight being a 10-8, because Gwerder was this close to being finished. Like, he got hit with a head kick, had him out on his feet. Bestaev, he thought that the ref was going to call the fight, so he kind of, you know, laid off the gas, and then he went to go push back up, wasn't able to get the finish. I think he ended up on his back in terms of like finishing the fight, and still won the fight unanimous decision. And there's another graphic which I might include, which is Taigwarter just looking at Bestaev, looking at him like, are you serious? Like, you actually, like, hands up, you really think you won the fight? Like, for real? And I think there was a little moment, a Forrest Griffin-esque moment for Bistayev when they, you know, called the fight unanimous decision in his name. It was kind of like, oh, yeah, I won. And of course, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to, you know, claim victory. You know, this is not the most honorable sport, even though mixed martial arts is supposed to be about honor and all of that stuff. You've seen it time and time again where people who didn't think they were going to win ended up getting the nod, and, you know, got to run with it, right? What are you going to say? Oh, no, I actually lost that? Like, no, you got to run with it at that point, or else it's going to be even worse for your brand. So at the end of the day, man, you know, if these fighters, these are their careers, man. You know, this is like, we don't see this stuff in basketball where they're saying like, all right, man, we're just going to have this super, you know, overt, corrupt kind of nature. And yeah, this is why your team lost. This is why your team lost out the playoffs or whatever. Obviously, they're getting paid a lot more playing basketball and football and all these sports than you are in mixed martial arts. And that's what makes it hit home even more, is because you want to do whatever is in the best thing for the athlete's career at the end of the day. And if PFL is going to really try to like make a hard budge into being one of these main mixed martial arts organizations from here on out, you got to do better with your officiating, man. You cannot have the Rory McDonalds, the Clay Collards get bounced out of tournaments because of poor officiating. And obviously, like I said, Rory McDonald, when his bad officiating against Gleason Tebow, that happened in the regular season, and he still had enough points or whatever to make it into the playoffs. So fortunately, you know, it didn't happen in the playoffs, and we can't count it, you know, as one of these offenses, but you can count it overall because it shouldn't be happening in the first place. And really, that's my thoughts on global scorecard. If we're going to do Verdict, let's do Verdict. And if you want to even take away Verdict and just find another system for doing global scorekeeping or whatever you want to call it, I understand that there is some hesitancy, right? You know, you don't want bots or whatever manipulating some scores, or people just saying like, oh, this is my favorite fighter, so I'm just going to score it all in, you know, for them, because that could totally happen. Like, who's there proctoring, making sure that this is an honest practice? You never really know. So I understand the hesitancy, and I understand why people say, you know, maybe I don't like it. Maybe I just want these 3 trained judges who have to be approved by the commission and have a history of scoring fights. But guess what? There's also commission approved officiators, judges who have notoriously had very terrible practices in history in terms of their scorecards, man, and they still get booked every single weekend. Why? Maybe it's because they need more judges. I don't know what it is, man, but if $1 million is on the line and you want people to come over to your promotion to secure that $1 million, you want big names from the UFC and the Bellators and all these other promotions, you know, you got to do better, man. You got to do better. And that basically concludes my thoughts on this weekend's events at Bellator 264 and PFL in regard to global scorecard and you know, just the actual judging that takes place, man. Someone needs to be held accountable. That's really what it comes down to for me. Somebody just needs to be held accountable, and I hope that one of these days we'll figure something out, because can't let this thing keep happening. Excuse me, man. You can't let it keep happening, in my opinion. But those are my thoughts. Once again, my name is Derick G. Thank you for joining me. Join us Mondays and Fridays on the Bloody Water Podcast, bloodywaterpodcast.com, or go give me a follow on Instagram at D496. And hopefully, man, you know, maybe I'll be putting up a couple more of these videos. I am starting up a Substack where you can find my writing and things of that nature, but that'll be announced in the near future. But that's it, folks. Until next time, peace.